Ah! 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 Whoa! Shh! Ah! 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 Oh! Gah! Oof! Ah! Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Damn! Ah! 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 Ah!
I had to reach the lighthouse. I'd be safe there. I knew that there was something important waiting for me there. No! Suddenly, I had a flashlight in my hand. I was in shock from the crash. I could hardly stay on my feet. I had to go to the lighthouse. I knew there was something important waiting for me there. The radiator had broken when I hit the hitchhiker. The car wasn't going anywhere. Something had happened. I'd squeezed the flashlight like my life depended on it, willing it to stop them from coming any closer. Suddenly something had given and the light of the flashlight had seemed to shine brighter. Suddenly I had a revolver in my hand. They were all characters from the story I'd been working on. They were all out to get me. I had to escape or he'd kill me. I realized that the hitchhiker was a character from the story I'd been working on. I was certain I had just driven from this direction. But now the road was blocked. The bridge had collapsed. I'd have to find another way to the lighthouse. I was trapped. There was no way out. The cabin was a death trap. I had to get out. Just like that, the monstrous presence that had attacked the cabin was gone, as if the light had washed it away. In the dream, I somehow understood what the strange UFO light was saying. In the nightmare, a terrible darkness was taking over the world. The lighthouse was the last safe place on Earth.
Sure. I'll even give you a title for the shot. A city boy, moments before he got eaten by a bear. Hi. Deerfest, huh? Did you hear that, honey?
Yeah, I'm Alan Wake. Look, Mr. Maine, I'm on vacation. In fact, I'd appreciate it if we could keep my being here just between the two of us. I'm sure you understand.
Right. Yeah, sounds like you've got a lazy bastard for a husband. Okay. Good day to you, too.
I wasn't ready to leave. I needed to find Carl Stuckey to get the key to the cabin.
Right. So much for a quiet vacation. And you keep it here. Well, okay. Good for you.
I didn't want to wait. I wanted to find Stuckey, to get the key and get out as soon as possible. The waitress was giving me a headache. Overeager fans always did.
Thanks, Rose. We'll be sure to keep that in mind. Yeah, that makes two of us. I think I can handle it, ma'am.
I hadn't seen her leave, but the old lady was gone. Are you all right?
I wish. Could have fooled me there.
I had the keys. Alice was outside. I didn't want to keep her waiting.
It's something, all right.
Don't worry, honey. I'll get you inside safe and sound before it gets dark. And I've got the flashlight. Alice had a phobia. The fear of darkness. I wanted to make sure we were inside with the lights on before sunset.
Yeah, Barry. Yeah, we just got here. No, Barry, we're fine. Barry,
we're just settling in.
I love you too, Barry.
Barry is Barry. I can always turn off the phone.
Text message from Barry. He says hi to you too. Here we go. Let's take a look inside. Come on.
The island had once been the site for a love story. Maybe it would be that again.
Sure thing. I'm on it.
The cabin looked like a time capsule from the 60s, or even earlier.
Ugh.
Great. So much for keeping a low profile. I needed to get the power running in the cabin. There had to be a fuse box or a generator somewhere on the island.
Hello? Anyone here?
The cabin obviously got its name from the shape of the island. It looked like a giant bird leg. Alice had mentioned that the lake was a caldera. There was a dormant volcano under it. Alice had told me about Cauldron Lake Lodge. The old building used to be a hotel, but these days it was no longer open to the public. The water was clear but dark. It looked very deep. The key fit in the lock. An old generator had been connected to the power cable.
Okay, I'll look around a bit.
Alice? Honey? A shoebox filled with books by Thomas Zane sat on the shelf. I'd never heard of him before. For a moment, the oppressive feel of the nightmare I had seen on the ferry returned. The water was black. I couldn't help but imagine all sorts of horrors lurking in the depths below. The old door had played a trick on me. Alice wouldn't have come out in the dark. I needed to go back inside. Alice was waiting for me in the cabin. Well, hello there. Okay. The cabin had gone dark. All the lights were out.
Alice, I'm coming! It's all right, I'm coming!
What the hell? Among Alice's things was a book, The Creator's Dilemma, by a Dr. Emil Hartmann. Seeing the book brought back my fight with Alice. I didn't like it, and I didn't like the guy's smug face on the cover either. The gas station was my best bet. They'd have a phone I could use. It looked like a long hike through the forest to get there. My headache flared.
Hello? I need help! Anybody there? Please, I've been in an accident!
The lights up ahead were a good sign. Maybe I wouldn't have to hike all the way down to the gas station to find a phone.
Oh, God!
Out in the open, I was as good as dead. The office looked like my best bet. I could lock myself in. Who or whatever that thing was would be back. I had to get to safety. I wasn't about to open the door, as long as I was liable to catch an axe with my forehead. Yes!
Hello? Hello?
Oof, this is bad. The bulldozer had gone over the cliff with the office. I hoped Stucky had suffered the same fate, but I wasn't planning on staying to find out. There were more of them. My head pounded with a concussion. I'd never fired a gun outside a shooting range, and now I just killed someone. Or something. There were no bodies. They just disappeared. If I was dreaming, it felt real enough to make me sick. The dark forest was the last place I wanted to go, but I had no choice. I had to get to the gas station. Eerie hand-painted graffiti was revealed by my flashlight. Someone had hidden a chest of supplies near it. Taken. They're taken. What the hell was that? When I saw the river below, something uncoiled itself inside my head. I realized that I'd have to find a way across. I didn't even want to look at the water. Stucky was still out there, in the dark, stalking me. The staircase was broken. I had to make my way up some other way. I couldn't stay here. There had to be a way to get up there. The stairs were useless. I had to find something else to help me climb up there. With all this forestry equipment around, there had to be something I could use to reach the top. There was no power. There was bound to be a generator somewhere at the logging site. The gas station was closer now, its light welcoming in the darkness. Stucky's body vanished, leaving behind only a lifetime of nightmares to come. Assuming I'd reached the lights of the gas station alive. I recognized the parade float I had seen in Bright Falls when I first arrived with Alice. After the insanity I had just experienced in the darkness, the lights of the gas station felt comforting. At least for a moment, the sane world reasserted itself. The Deer Fest had been 2 weeks away when we arrived. If the day count on the banner was right, I was missing a whole week between the night we got here and now. I had to get inside the gas station to find a phone to call for help. The garage was a mess. It looked like someone had trashed the place, or that there'd been some kind of fight. I don't believe this. It'd been me on the TV, talking crazy. Was I losing my mind? There was another manuscript page on the counter.
Honey, I'm home. Worst weather I've ever seen.
Worst weather I've ever seen. I guess you're gonna need that coffee then. I'll go put it on.
Coffee's on.
No kidding. I didn't think you'd get them done this quickly. Oh, really? These look really good.
I'm right here. I'm on it, honey.
I'm right here. I'm on it, honey.
I'm right here, baby. Honey, it's a power outage. I've got the flashlight. I'll be right there. Come on, deep breaths, okay?
You okay? Don't worry. We'll just break out the candles. Alice was missing. I needed help to find her. I wasn't ready to leave. Doc Nelson was the image of a small-town doctor. Sheriff Breaker had called him to the station to take a look at the cut in my head. I'm sorry you had to cut your morning fishing short for this, Doc. I'll take your word for it, Doc. She'd fit right in where I come from.
Have you started looking for my wife yet? I'm not sure. I can't remember. We were arguing. I walked out of the cabin.
Who is this? I need some fresh air. Can I go out? In the back, maybe? I'm sorry. All of this, it's just a lot to take in. It's personal. I need a moment. After I get some fresh air. I need to go outside. Clear my head. I couldn't go anywhere yet. I had to play along with the caller. Alice's life was at stake. I need to get some air. The sheriff said I could go out back. Thanks. Okay. Right. Thanks. The early morning light hurt my eyes and made my head ache. The man on the phone had said, go through the fence on the left. The caller had told me to find a hole in the fence behind the police station. There was something for me in an abandoned car. Alice's driver's license had been placed on the front seat. The caller meant business.
Barry? Barry, listen to me. I'm at the sheriff's station. Come and get me. I can't talk now.
I had to get the sheriff to let me go. I needed to get to Elderwood National Park to meet Alice's kidnappers. What an airhead. I'd come here to rent a cabin where I could wait till midnight.
No! Look, Barry, I'm missing a week, and someone's got Alice, and everything's just...
Wait here. Wait here.
We just wait here.
Hey, Rusty, right?
You rent cabins. What happened? Okay, sure. She's my wife, and it's my call. Can we talk about this later? Later. Wait here. Here you go.
Guess the laugh's on me then.
Well, thanks for the heartfelt vote of confidence.
No one asked you to come here, Barry. Either work with me on this or go straight back to New York. Your choice. I think this is the form you wanted.
Thanks. Can you tell me how to get to Lover's Peak?
Right. Thanks. I'd gotten what I'd come for. It was time to go.
Bless you. Lock the door when I leave.
I knew I should have gone to the cops. This wasn't the smartest thing I'd ever done, but I was still angry with Barry for trying to talk me out of it. These people had called me right in the sheriff's station. The cops wouldn't scare them. And they had Alice. Barry had the keys to the car he rented. It wasn't a long walk to the visitor center, and it wouldn't be any use to me in the forest. The vision left me weak. This was no head injury.
Forget about it, Barry. It's just me going crazy. Stay in the cabin. Don't open the door for anyone. I mean it.
Rusty? Damn.
Rusty, hang on! I'm coming!
The gate to Lover's Peak was locked. The ranger's office was locked. I'd need a key to get in.
Hello?
Whatever did this couldn't be far. Rusty had found a page from the manuscript. It would help me understand what had happened. Shh. Good boy. The only way to make sure that Rusty was safe was to get the power running and the lights back on. I was too late. Someone had destroyed the circuit breaker. There was no way to get the lights back on.
Rusty! Rusty!
Something had torn a mammoth-sized hole in the wall.
Rusty? Rusty, no!
Lover's Peak was at the far end of the nature trail.
Oh, crap. You can see them too? Why? Yeah, but...
It took a moment, but then I recognized him. He'd been on the ferry when I first arrived here with Alice. He knew my name. We were headed in the direction of Lover's Peak. There was no way this was a coincidence. He was the kidnapper.
I lost my gun back there.
The gate was boarded up. I could only hope the kidnapper knew the way. Give me the gun.
Are you kidding? Give me the gun! Give me the goddamn gun! They're coming! No! Come back here! I swear I'll kill you if you hurt Alice! Do you hear me? Come back here!
He had Alice, and he wanted the manuscript because he thought it held some magical power. But I had no manuscript to give him. I had to get back to Barry and figure out my next move. I had heard the plane fall. It made no sense. It was clear that it had just fallen here, but it was very old and obviously hadn't flown in decades. Looking at it sent a shiver down my spine. The ground was covered with oily patches that looked like liquid darkness.
Ah! What the hell?
Rusty had warned me about these traps. It hurt like hell. I was stuck. Rusty had warned me about these traps. I wouldn't want to get caught in one of them. Those teeth looked nasty.
Barry, stay out of sight. I'm on my way. Don't open the door. Stay hidden. I'll be there soon. Just make sure you keep the lights on.
I still had to reach Barry at the cabin, but at least I was out of the woods. I'd have to get the car from the locked garage. It would get me back to Barry faster, and the headlights were a welcome bonus. I had to find the key to the garage. I needed the garage key to get to the car. The garage key had to be somewhere nearby. The flare gun was probably the best weapon I could imagine against the dark things I was facing. It was the kidnapper.
You son of a bitch! Where's my wife? I don't... Listen. I'm gonna need time to finish it. I still need to write the ending. I need a week. Yes, I get you.
Barry had talked about birds over the phone.
Barry? You can open the door now. They're gone.
We're looking for Rose. Works as a waitress down at the diner. I'm Alan Wake.
Rose, you have my manuscript?
I felt nauseous, hungover. Only anger kept me going. Rose took a day from me. I had less than 12 hours left to meet the kidnapper. All I could do was get Barry into the car, work something out once I got on the road. Barry was out of it. He was way too heavy to carry. I couldn't work up much hate for Rose. Something had used her to get to me and left its mark. My gun and flashlight were gone. I'd have to find a way to get Barry into the car as quickly as possible. There was no time to waste. I hated to leave Barry behind, but there was no way I'd miss my appointment with the kidnapper. Oh, damn! This horror was everywhere I went, circling me. The cops didn't stand a chance. They were after a writer, not a monster. Unnatural shadows clung to the gate. The darkness that was after me was trying to stop me. I wouldn't get through without a light. There was no power to the searchlight. I could see the lights of the radio station in the distance. The old generator conked out. I'd have to see if I could fix it and try again. If it had just been the sheriff, I'd have taken my chances. She seemed sensible enough. But with this Agent Nightingale in the picture, surrender was not an option. I imagined that the broadcast tower in the distance was part of the local radio station. Maine seemed like a decent guy. Perhaps he could give me directions to the coal mine. I hoped Maine could lend me a car to get to the coal mine. I had no idea how to get to the coal mine. Maine would know. and I had a feeling I wouldn't get a chance to ask anyone else anytime soon. I had fallen off so many cliffs it was ridiculous. That's what you get for naming a book The Sudden Stop. It was probably good I hadn't had the chance to tell Maine where I was going. I'd have to lose the cops and find my own way to the mine. There was no sensible reason for the power company work lights to be here. It was almost as if they'd been left for someone like me to use.
Hello? Alice? Alice? Alice, I'm here!
The connection had been terrible, but that wasn't the only thing that hadn't been right with the call. She sounded wrong somehow. But she had called me. I could see a railway bridge up ahead and a warehouse of some sort on the opposite shore. I hoped I could find a car from there. The darkness that was pursuing me was growing stronger, and it was taking over everything in its path. As a teenager, just starting to get interested in writing, Stephen King had been a source of inspiration to me. I thought about all the inanimate objects that had come to life in his books. No one is safe in a good horror story. Certainly not the protagonist. That's what makes them fun. This was anything but. The darkness could possess anything, and it was getting closer. Little by little, without realizing it, I'd come to believe that the story in the manuscript was coming true. The current of its narrative had taken me deeper and deeper into dark waters. Even during daytime, I was being stalked. The bridge must have collapsed only moments after I'd crossed it. Alice had been taken from me. Barry was probably in jail. I was a fugitive from the FBI. The whole world taken over by the dark presence was trying to destroy me. It all felt real, but it matched a textbook case of insanity. Today, I would meet the kidnapper, and he would give me Alice. I wouldn't give him any other choice. A drowning man will clutch at a straw. I was early. I was supposed to meet the kidnapper at noon in the main building. The coal mine was quiet. It was a museum now. The atmosphere in the tunnel was heavy, oppressive, like sinking underwater. I wanted to leave, but something urged me forward. Without warning, the headache stabbed at my brain. Alice?
Alice!
A wave of nausea washed over me. I needed to leave this place as quickly as possible. This wasn't metal I was tasting. I was sure it was the darkness itself. I'm losing it. I gotta get out of here.
Where the hell are you? I'm through being jerked around by you. I want to talk to Alice. Hello? Hello! I'm gonna kill him!
I had to get to Mirror Peak. It was close. Maybe closer than ever before. The only way to reach the hillside ahead was to go through the building. I had to find a way to avoid electrocution. I wondered if the occupants of the cemetery had in their time experienced anything like what was now happening to me. I had no real plan. I was going to give the kidnapper all the manuscript pages I had for Alice. If that wasn't enough, I'd hold him at gunpoint and make him talk. It took me a moment to recognize the flashbang grenades. They were an ideal weapon for my situation. There was no way the flashbang grenades were standard power company equipment. The dark presence was moving ahead of me in the same direction I was going. A cold feeling settled itself in the pit of my stomach. Was it going for Alice? The place was dead. A ghost town. Had been for decades, maybe a century. The kidnapper had sent me a text. The message was full of spelling errors and insults. He was telling me to hurry up. I'd have to make my way up this mine shaft in order to go on. Maybe the machinery could help me with that. Oh, great. Another cable car. Just great. I could see Cauldron Lake. I thought I could make out the spot where the island and the cabin had been. There was a light near it. It had to be a boat. I was close now. I had to get there fast. I dreaded what I would find.
Hey, I'm here! I'm coming!
I felt groggy. Whatever Hartman had bumped in me was making me numb. I felt like this was happening to someone else. Someone I was watching on television. I couldn't think. Couldn't focus. There were only empty sheets of paper here. No manuscript pages. The door was locked. I was a prisoner here. Yeah, I see you brought your pet gorilla with you. So sure, I'm calm. I get the message. Loud and clear. Big of you. I bet you do. No, I wasn't ready for another shot. So I went along with it. He had to be lying. But under the influence of the drug he had given me, I had to fight not to believe his words. Cauldron Lake spread below us. I could see Mirror Peak on the other side of the lake. I thought I could make out the spot where Diver's Isle had been when I arrived with Alice. Now there was nothing but waves. I let him talk. Hartman obviously loved his own voice. His words echoed madly inside my head. I dug my nails into the palms of my hands to stay focused. Pretty damn wonderful, yeah. No kidding.
No. Sorry, guys.
Okay. Yeah? The doors were locked. Hartman and the nurses would have keys, but there was no way to get my hands on them. Hartman wanted me to write. I knew I couldn't, but I figured I should just play along for now. It was the only thing I could do with Nurse Birch watching me like a hawk. Hartman had mentioned that the power had been acting up. Maybe that was the reason for the generator and the work light on the balcony. The generator hadn't been activated, and there was no key. My head was clearing up, or according to Hartman, I was sinking back into the fantasy. I was convinced he was lying to me about everything. Crazy or not, the Andersons made more sense. I didn't know what the chaos was all about, but it could be my only chance of getting out of here. I could get the key to the office wing from Sinclair. Sinclair looked bad. That wasn't a love tap. The crazy old fart hit her hard. And if she was one of Hartman's goons, she had it coming. The photo on the wall caught my attention. In it, the clinic staff was standing outside the lodge. I knew the man next to Hartman. He was the kidnapper. Hartman had been playing me all along. I had to get to Hartman's office. He had taken all my manuscript pages. That's where he'd been keeping them. The markings on the tape said they were recordings Hartman had made of the sessions with his patients. I saw Alice's name on one of them. For a moment, I couldn't breathe right. Hearing her voice, what she was saying made me happy and sick and guilty all at once. Worst of all, I recognized...
Barry! Man, am I glad to see you.
You okay? What's with the cutout?
Yeah, that's a harsh punishment. Come on, pal, we gotta get going. We need to get to Hartman's office.
There was no time to waste. I had to go to Hartman's office, get the missing pages, and get out. The dark presence would be on me in a moment. I had to find a way out. I needed light to get the possessed bookshelves out of my way. There had been a generator and a work light on the balcony.
Barry, I don't have a light. Let's get out of here. Can you open this gate? Barry! Hurry up, Barry!
I had lost my gun in the crash. Barry was nowhere to be seen.
Barry! Forget that! Are you okay? Barry, it's a taken! Use a flare, Barry! Barry, are you alright? Barry, just wait for me, okay?
Now he's Rambo. This would turn into a disaster if I didn't catch up with Barry. Someone had left a gun behind. Now I had a fighting chance of reaching the farm. Shadows crawled over the gate. I needed a light to destroy them to get through. I hoped there'd still be a working generator somewhere around here to power up the old lights by the gate. I had seen glimpses of the light before. I had seen it in my dream. It was a strange spaceman or a diver in a bulky suit. He was the one who'd been placing the pages on my path. I could sense the movement in the woods ahead. Facing the enemy without a weapon was dangerous, but I had no choice. A car was driving away from the farm, headed in the same general direction as I was. For all I knew, it was Barry, caught in the consequences of leaping before looking. The car was heading for the cabin up ahead. It wasn't far. If it was Barry, I would see the damage soon. I could see the car, but there was no sight of the driver.
Hello? Barry, anybody here?
The front door was locked. I know you. You were in jail the other day. Let me guess. Danny, huh? I could climb out through the broken window. The farm was still a good distance away. I'd need a car to get there fast. I could go it on foot, but I'd make better time in a car. If Barry wasn't up here, he was probably in trouble down at the farm. For a moment, I felt bad for doubting him. After all, I'd made it this far myself. But Barry was Barry. Ugh. You've got to be kidding. I'd known the brothers used to be some kind of rock stars, but it hadn't really sunk in until I saw the stage.
I'm so glad you decided to go it alone, Mr. Bronson. They are trying to kill us. That's the high point of my life? Really?
Bright Falls, rock and roll capital of America. Good luck with that, pal. The door was barred from the other side. I'd have to find another way.
I'm good. Keep your eyes open, okay?
The elevator was dead. I'd have to get some power to it first. I could see the building that had to be the Andersons' home on the other side of the field. It wasn't far now. I wasn't worried about trusting the ramblings of two burned-out geriatric wrecks. They had the goods. You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it's me. Hang on. I'll try to find a key to get the door open.
I had to find a key to get Barry out. We should feel right at home then. Yeah. I don't think they keep too close an eye on them at the clinic. They seem to slip away a lot so they can get wasted. The power downstairs was out, but I was sure I could fix that at the fuse box. Yeah, that's been my biggest worry all this time.
And this from the guy who learned about Ozzy Osbourne through reality TV?
You want me to do my imitation of Barry Wheeler? No? Thought so. We need to get this thing moved out of the way. I think I see what you did there. The Viking boat looked imposing, almost like a battering ram. Of course, we need to find where it's coming from. That's the message the Andersons talked about. That's the whole reason we're here. Cynthia Weaver.
Alice, I'm coming. It's all right. I'm coming.
It was a crazy, drunken dream. And yet, it was more than that. It was the truth. A suppressed memory unearthed by the Andersons' moonshine. I was there, an out-of-body observer. This was the night Alice and I had arrived at Bright Falls, the night Alice had disappeared. I had a chance to find out what had happened. Beyond this lost memory, there was nothing. I had to follow the footsteps of my past self to find out what had happened that night. Whatever power had brought me back to this night at the lake was also stopping me from leaving. I had no choice but to see it through, to find out what had happened. I remembered being surprised to see the cabin dark. Alice would have never turned the lights off.
Alice? Alice!
I remembered thinking I caught a glimpse of her form underwater, sinking into the darkness. Diving after her was the last vague memory I had of that night. After that, the next thing I could remember was waking up behind the wheel of the crash car and finding the first pages of the manuscript.
Alice!
Jagger had Alice, and so she had me.
Alice! Alice!
I'd been easy prey. I couldn't find her in all that blackness. I must have thought she drowned.
Alice? Alice!
The dark presence had touched me. She had dug her nails into my brain and used me, made me her puppet.
Alice! 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 No, no, no!
She had Alice, and the manuscript was the ransom for her. All the manuscript pages were gone. The FBI agent had taken them. That about sums it up. I need to talk to Weaver. She's the one in the song. The Lady of the Light.
Light. We need light. It's the only way to fight this thing. They can be hurt in the light, only in the light. And I need to find Cynthia Weaver. She can help me stop this.
My hangover wants you to shut up and get to work.
I'll go. I'll open the gate for you once I'm across. You stay here in the light and cover me, Sheriff, okay?
I needed to reach the rooftop to get to the other side of the broken gate.
Hey, Sheriff! Your password. Night Springs? What's that all about?
I couldn't leave without the sheriff. She was my ticket to Weaver.
What am I, an electrician? Hold on!
Ow, damn it. That's smarts.
The air smelled of fish. This was Bright Falls industrial area. There was probably a cannery nearby. The same thing I think happened to me after I remember now.
It's an ambush! I already got electrocuted once today. How about I look for the keys and you get burned for a change?
Gotcha.
I'm just gonna take a quick look.
The message was from Barry. He was getting worried at the station. He wanted us to hurry.
Okay, Sheriff, I got the keys. Barry! Barry! Can you hear me? Are you okay in there? Are you sure?
It's me they want. The sooner I get out of here, the sooner you can all get back to life as usual. Wait, you got the keys to the bookstore? Right now, I'm not a big fan of my own writing.
I don't see Barry. Here they come!
Wow, why? Yeah, there's no way going through the crypt will turn out to be a bad idea.
What are the Christmas lights for?
Vampires.
Hey, I want a headlamp.
Bastard.
Well, get ready. I'll hold them off.
I had to do something about the chain for the door to open. The power plant glowed in the night. It was close, but I had to find a way across. I couldn't get across until I found a way to turn the bridge. The rotating bridge was open. I had to find a way to close it. There had to be controls nearby to turn the bridge. I recognized the logo on the power plant sign. I'd seen a version of it painted all over the area, signifying hidden caches of supplies.
Excuse me? Will it help me find Alice? Will it get me back to the cabin? Fine, let's go. I can get my friends to come back with the helicopter.
Let me guess. You want me to do it? Weaver had sent me to cut the power to the transformer yard. I was willing to do grunt work for her to get her to help me. I hoped Weaver was dependable. I'd stumbled into this crazy world a little over a week ago. She had been living this insanity for decades. The transformer yard went dark and dead. Weaver's water pipe passage should now be good to go. I could see the kill switch that would cut the power to the transformer yard. Now I had to find a way to reach it. Who designs these things? If I could figure out the gates, I could use them to get to the kill switch. I'm starting to realize that. How do you know all this? At least I didn't have to worry about her. She knew how to stay safe.
Barry! Sheriff Breaker! Sarah!
The crash site looked bad, but as far as I could tell, the wreck was empty.
Barry! Barry! Hang in there, I'm coming!
I have a different ending in mind. I knew you'd be all right. The flaming eye of Mordor. Weaver will meet us at the dam. Well, Weaver's crazy, but she's got something Zane left behind. Something to fix this. Yeah, well, he was real.
You guys go ahead and find Weaver! She should be in the dam now. I'll have to make it alone through the top.
I was ridiculously outnumbered. The searchlight could even the odds.
No!
I had a hangover. My head was about to explode and the light hurt my eyes. I needed my sunglasses and painkillers to dull the pain. In one of my finer moments of self-deception, I swore to quit drinking. I wasn't sure if I could face the world without my sunglasses and something for my headache. The lights were like needles in my eyes. I needed my sunglasses. I wasn't sure I'd make it out there without some painkillers. The sunglasses made the world look bearable. Now I could keep my eyes open without feeling like a vampire in the sun. The pills worked fast. The prospect of being awake started to seem bearable again. There was a message waiting for me on the machine. I'd been a guest on the talk show the previous night, talking about my latest book. The show was supposed to be waiting for me on our TiVo.
Yeah, good read. Go buy it. Is that wise? Wow, thanks. Good riddance. No, seriously though, 7 years and 6 books is a long time. He was a gloomy guy to spend all your working hours with, and it was a good run. But it's time to explore new things. My next book will be a departure from the old for me. Yeah, no kidding. Casey's lady friends tended to die on him. With Casey, it was all about his pain. No, nothing autobiographical about that. I'm a happily married man. My wife is my muse. Good? Great. But I gotta say, I'm glad to be back home in New York. Oh, man. Well, that guy was really in my face. I lost my temper. I know that wasn't cool. Well, I did also write several books.
At least I'd been funny. I told myself I could live with that.
I didn't say anything stupid if that's what you want to know. Are you going to start with me about drinking now?
I should have followed her advice. But suddenly I was angry, mostly at myself. And she was there, a convenient victim, alone, in daylight, surrounded by the beauty. The darkness had touched me. There was a link between us, always would be. I could feel its presence again, getting closer. I could see Mirror Peak in the distance. That's where Cauldron Lake was. Based on the signature in the motel register, Agent Nightingale had stayed here, in room number 2. This had obviously been the room where Agent Nightingale had stayed when he hadn't been busy harassing me. I had to get the container out of my way. There had to be a way to power up the container lift. When I told Barry my plan back in the well-lit room, I'd acted as if I knew what I was doing. I didn't. I was operating on the shifting logic of a dream. I had to fight my way to the lake through the horrors of the night. I had to flick an old battered light switch imbued with childhood magic. I had to write a happy ending to a horror story. I had to save my wife from the dark prison she was being held in. The dark presence blocked my way to the lake. It wasn't going to let me pass. I'd have to fight it to get through. I had to get light. The flare gun was the only way to get light into the heart of the dark presence. I had to hit its heart with as many flares as possible to stop it. I had to keep shooting flares into...
My fear? It's your fear. Why aren't you afraid? You're not Alice. Turn the lights on now. Where's the clicker? What did you do with it?
I followed the idea of a path. I had written myself across the ocean. I willed the cabin to be real.
What? Alice? No, what are you saying? You can't. No, I love you more than anything in the world. You're my muse. Who are you? What have you done with my Alice?
It wasn't true. Nothing like that had ever happened.
You're not my Barbara. No, you're not Barbara Jagger. I made a terrible mistake. I should have never written you back. You came back wrong. Your heart is filled with darkness. Your heart is filled with darkness. I'll cut it out. Then I'll take you back to the depths you came from.
Filled with darkness.
Alice! Alice! I'm coming!
I had a disturbing feeling of déjà vu. I had no idea why I was here or where I had been before this moment. But something was waiting for me at the back of the diner. When they started fading away into ghosts, I wasn't really surprised. I couldn't leave. The eerie feeling of being carried along in a nightmare grew stronger. A part of me had known what these people were going to say before they said it.
What?
What do you mean? At the sight of myself, the dream suddenly became lucid. The dark place. That's where I was. I didn't understand Zane's message, and knowing where I was didn't fix anything. Something had gone wrong after I had finished departure.
Zane! Wait for me!
What the hell was that? The world had become twisted. These trees didn't belong here. Hello?
Yes.
Something had shifted again. The dark place was playing tricks on me. It wouldn't stay still. It made no sense for the GPS system to work. I doubted any satellite was in range here. These were alien skies, but it was guiding me towards something. Towards Zane? Everything I saw was familiar, and yet it wasn't.
Hello? I'm trying!
The GPS system was supposed to lead me to Zane, but the shifts were interfering with it. I had to keep trying. I wouldn't survive alone. The changes were becoming more violent. The street wasn't so much ripped apart as it was missing. Like some great hand had reached down and scooped it up. Everything felt erratic, unstable.
Where are you? Look, I'm trying to follow your goddamn signal.
What is this?
What? This is bullshit.
I was running after Zane, and he was telling me I was going too deep. It was ridiculous, but I was more scared than amused. I felt like I was being hindered by an unseen force in ways I couldn't fight. All I could do was keep going. I remembered this. This happened before we found Barry. Asshole.
Gah! Not again!
The shifts were getting more severe. I wasn't sure if the place got bigger or I got smaller. The signal was going haywire. I would have to find my way out of here on my own. Zane left me a page. He was trying to help me. Took everything I had not to scream. I'd been a constant fixture on the bestseller list. A tremor. But the volcano was supposed to be dormant. I hit a wall. Plain and simple. I was happy to see a friend. But Zane had left me the page for a reason. Perhaps one of the words that appeared would be helpful.
Barry? You're not real. That's insane. Okay, look, I gotta get going. The GPS, fine, enough. I can't believe I was actually happy to see you.
I must be a sucker for punishment. Thanks for that. You nag the way the real Barry does. You know that?
I don't think you're annoying.
I think the signal's pointing towards that thing in the distance. How the hell do you know that? Fantastic.
Barry.
Yeah, thanks for the help with that.
All right, if you complete that sentence, you're fired. You're fired. Really? You think?
Your insight is staggering.
Whoa!
That's horseshit. This kind of thing could drive a man insane. I had seen weird transmissions of myself before, but not like this. The version of myself I saw now sounded insane, like a demented storyteller who was out to torment and destroy his protagonist.
Get off me! Ugh! Enough!
Barry, is all this really coming out of my head? But you're from my imagination. If I'm making this up, why is it so complicated? Shut your mouth.
Barry, I'm so sick of you!
No, it isn't.
You're not even really there.
I knew she wasn't really here, but she still made my heart ache. I had saved Alice, but I wasn't even sure when that happened. Was it days ago? Weeks? Longer? I had no way of knowing. I could only hope that Alice was all right. I didn't know what happened to her after she left the dark place.
Zane? Is that you?
Like this? But I'm not dangerous. And dangerous. Great. I want to get out of this suit. Guess danger is sexy. That was when I was still working. When I felt like a real writer instead of a fraud. It was a good memory. I wished I hadn't seen it. Zane, how do I get out of here?
No, I'm right here, Zane. That's not me. It's just, I don't know, an echo, a hallucination, the dark presence. Shut up!
Ugh, I think I'm stuck on this side. Fine. I could feel the pressure mounting. Barry was right. Time was running out. Everything I saw was a dark, twisted version of reality, but I hadn't given up. Thomas Zane had reached me. I had run across a nightmarish landscape following a signal from him. He kept telling me I was sinking, going too deep. I wasn't sure if he meant the dark place or insanity. Perhaps they were one and the same. After finishing Departure, I felt finished myself. All I had wanted was to save Alice. After that, a part of me had been ready to just give in and die. I was literally fighting myself. It was a moment of clarity. I would need the flashlight to go on. I wouldn't last long without it. I had to accept it. If all of this was from my mind, then I was the one making all this happen. I guess, but I actually feel pretty rational. All things considered. That's Zane's light.
That's very deep, but I'm a little busy not dying over here.
This is just a memory. Zane, you're not coming?
You could have just told me what was going on in plain English, you know?
Now that I knew what I was facing, the environment became even wilder and stranger. Like it was no longer even bothering to pretend that things were normal. I couldn't reach the word with my flashlight. There had to be another way to trigger it. The cabin. The lighthouse? Okay, that's different. I would have to make my way through the swirling madness. It reminded me of the dark presence, just another memory, but it could still kill me.
Whoa, jeez! You can't want me dead this badly.
Things are getting pretty crazy here, Zane. I was glad to have Zane with me in this place. He knew the terrain, such as it was, but a part of me wondered if he was even human anymore, after so many years in this place. How the hell are you doing that? You were in my dream. Okay. Weird room. There's a shock.
Oh, now what? This is ridiculous!
An elevator? Sure, why not? Next stop, sanity. It's hard to make sense of this place. The dark presence. Is there any way out of here? Stucky's gas station. Not something I particularly wanted to see, but obviously I wasn't the one in the driver's seat. Zane, I'm not sure where to go here. At least the lighthouse was much closer now. I would have to make my way up there somehow. There was no power to the log lift. The generator was running just fine, but I still had to find a way to connect it to the log lift. Why do I have to keep fighting myself like this? I don't think I like that.
Wait, are you telling me I'm not real? So there are two of me? And the one you called Mr. Scratch, he's me as well? Zane, are you playing some kind of game with me? How can you say that when you wrote that page about me and the clicker? It wasn't one of my pages. You directed me to it. You had Weaver guard it. What? I don't understand. Zane? Zane, come on!
Well, that cleared things up.
Whoa!
This was just another attempt to confuse me. By now I knew these phantoms and figments for what they were. Echoes of the pain, guilt, and hopelessness a part of me wallowed in. I didn't need to hear it. It wasn't really her, and it would just be poison in my ears, torture I could do without. There was no point in playing mind games with myself. It was nonsense. I knew I had saved her. I'd succeeded in that, and that was all that mattered. What I heard in there wasn't the truth. It was just another toxic mirage. It cut deep, but that made me all the more determined to force myself to snap out of it. I didn't want to be that guy anymore. I had to make myself see the light. Even with the light gone, all I could do was keep going. I felt like the typewriter was mocking me. I was supposed to be calling the shots, but for a long time, it had been the other way around. But I had mastered it again in the end. I was the writer, and it was just the tool of my trade, the lighthouse. I was relieved to have made it here, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen now. Zane had left me. I wasn't sure what the dark presence had done to him if he couldn't follow, but from now on, I was on my own. Still, he had gotten me this far. I would never have made it by myself. This thing was going to end. It wouldn't be long now. Yeah, well, I think I can do that. A lot of the stuff I've seen here is personal and ugly as hell. I'll admit it hurts, but it's not fooling me. I know it's fake. I'll make it. I don't have any choice. Thanks, I guess. Come on, I don't do that. Oh, man. I was surprised by the change of scenery, but not much. I was starting to understand the symbolism, the way the dark place flowed. What? This is ridiculous. You're not even real. Fine, you're abandoned. Bye. I could feel a certain resistance fading away. It was like a part of me had given up the struggle, resigned itself to being back under control. The air in the visitor center was heavy with an awful smell, as if some rotten drowned thing had crawled up from its grave. Rusty kept coughing blood. My eyes were drawn to the twisted shape of his broken leg. The attack had been vicious. Max whined in his cage. Rusty's eyes were wild with fear and terror. He gasped. Mr. Wake, it happened just the way it was on that page. For decades, the darkness that wore Barbara Jagger's skin slept fitfully in the dark place that was its home and prison. It was hungry and in pain. It dreamed of its nights of glory when the poet's writing had called it from the depths and given it a brief, terrible taste of power and freedom. The rock stars had stirred it from the deep sleep the poet had sunk it back to in the end. When it sensed the writer on the ferry, it opened its eyes. For a long time, the dark presence had been weak, sleeping, nothing but a half-forgotten nightmare or a shadowy flicker in the corner of an eye in the forest at night. Not real enough to properly exist, and yet too evocative to fade away completely. Now it was waking up. The rider like a fly caught in a spider's web, each jerk and kick vibrating the strands that led deep into its lair. It was aware of him now, and it could use him. All he'd need was a little incentive. For Mott, spying on the rider on the ferry had been a disappointment. His boss had made Wake out to be something special, but Mott hadn't been impressed. He'd gotten a good long look at the wife, though, and he liked what he saw. Mott had fantasized about goading Wake into a fight, but it hadn't happened. Still, he'd get his chance to see if the writer had anything in him. He'd been promised as much. Rose knew she had been gushing, but right now she didn't care. As far as she was concerned, her brief meeting with Alan Wake was literally the high point of her life. She watched as he got in the car with his wife. She was pretty, confident, at ease with Wake. Not like Rose. They were perfect for each other. She'd have given anything to be called their friend. In spite of its human mask, to describe the dark presence as intelligent would have implied human qualities on something decidedly inhuman. Nonetheless, it found the one spot in the diner that was dark enough. Some light spilled into the corridor, ravaging it. But it took the pain. Horrible as it was, the writer would soon fix that. He would be coming to the one place where it still had power. Alice looked through the viewfinder, lining up the shot. Cauldron Lake was breathtaking. Something caught her eye. A figure standing in the shadows behind the cabin, like a thin woman in a black dress. She lowered the camera and looked again. No one there. Just a collection of bushes that looked vaguely human-shaped. She shook her head and laughed. Barry Wheeler was bouncing off the walls. He jumped on a plane after his calls were ignored by both Al and Alice for several days. It could mean that they were both on a second honeymoon. But Barry didn't buy it. Al had been way too unstable for that, not sleeping, messed up. Barry had years of experience dealing with Alan Wake, and he couldn't ignore it. Something was wrong. Stuckey spat on the garage floor and tried to shake the cobwebs from his head. Ever since the couple never showed to pick up the keys, things had been fuzzy. Something, a feeling caught his attention. Stuckey looked up and stared as his brain tried in vain to process the horror before him. He stumbled back, knocking over a can of oil. A black pool spread across the floor while he struggled for a brief moment. then let go as the unrelenting darkness engulfed him. Toby knew the smell. It was the man, the nice man who always gave him treats and never got tired of playing with him. Toby wagged his tail in excited anticipation and gave a joyous bark. Then there was another smell, a wrong smell, and it was alien enough to stop Toby in his tracks. Confused, he growled deep in his throat. The wrong smell came from the nice man. Blind animal terror pierced the dog's brain an instant before the axe followed suit. Sarah didn't care about the legal threats Wake's agent had made. She let Wake go without argument, because there was something about him she couldn't quite put her finger on, something that reminded her of her father. She didn't think Wake would hurt his wife. Then she thought about the way he waded into Hartman, that hair-trigger rage flaring up without warning. Rose knew that Rusty was in love with her, and she liked him too. She liked him a lot. He taught her to dance, and life had certainly taught her the value of a man who was gentle. He treated her well, made her smile, made her feel good. But Rusty wasn't the prince of her dreams, and that tended to underline the unbearable truth. She was no closer to that Hollywood magic than he was. The logging site was a mess. The modular office had been pushed off the cliff. Deputy Thornton climbed. Barry had never gotten along with Alice, but he knew Alan loved her with an almost frightening intensity. And now something had happened to Alice. In that last instant of consciousness, Rusty thought about Rose. He was older than she was. Rose was barely out of her teens, but she made him feel young and forget what a train wreck his long-dead marriage had been. He still wore the ring. He'd been waiting for her to tell him to take it off. Now she never would. Mott knew that Wake was smarter than him. Wake had more money, a beautiful wife, everything. And Hartman said Wake was important. That made him better than Mott. But Mott was calling the shots now. He'd expected Wake to whimper and grovel, but instead, he seemed willing to fight. Mott knew he'd gotten under Wake's skin, if only Mott actually had his wife. The thought made him shiver. When Barry saw the darkness attack the visitor center, it made him a believer. The men Al said he'd shot, they hadn't been just locals on crank. Somehow the world had changed. Hartman wasn't happy. Mott could see it in his eyes. He quickly lowered his own. He had made a mess of it, and he knew it. The shame of failure was hard to bear. He hadn't expected Wake to say he needed more time, and he blurted out 2 days, less than Wake had asked for, to show him who was in charge. But that wasn't part of Hartman's plan. For a moment, Hartman considered strangling the idiot. Mott was mean-spirited, but easily manipulated, an emotional infant who lived for his approval. Wake, by contrast, was a far more difficult subject. Mott had given him too much leash. In 2 days, who knew what could happen? Hartman would have to find a way to rein him in, and quickly. Agent Nightingale didn't want to be in Bright Falls. These little communities revolted him, and he didn't like the trees or the coffee. He now knew that impossible horrors lurked behind the storefronts and smiles. He desperately wanted to turn the car around and just drive until he passed out or ran out of road and booze. But he had a job to do. He had a rider to catch, at any cost. Sarah trusted her gut, and her gut said Agent Nightingale was an asshole. He felt wrong, and it wasn't just the smell of stale booze. It was even behind the closed doors and curtains of his grimy room at the Majestic, the local motel. Nightingale could feel the locals' eyes on him, the unrelenting pressure of their judgment. He forced it out of his mind. For all he knew, they could all be under Wake's spell already. You do what you have to do to get the job done. He took comfort from the bottle in his hand. Please, he thought, just let me get through this. Some of the taken retained echoes of their former selves, but these were just the nerve twitches of a dead thing. Nothing remained but a shell covered and filled with darkness. In most cases, these puppets were enough for the purposes of the dark presence. But for anything more elaborate, as with the writer, it was different. It needed his mind. And so rather than taking him over completely, it merely touched him. Rose didn't know how the strange old lady got in her trailer, and she looked wrong somehow. The woman showed her teeth in an approximation of a smile and traced a finger down Rose's cheek. "Pretty girl," she said. Rose felt as if she was falling asleep, but her knees didn't buckle. The crone spoke in a whisper, her words ice cold and dark in Rose's ear. Touched by the dark presence, Rose was lost in a dreamland where everything was drawn in black and gray crayons. The old lady had promised her that all her wishes would come true. She would be Alan Wake's muse. She was smiling so hard it hurt her face. She crushed a bottle full of sleeping pills into the coffee. Deep down inside, she was screaming in terror. Mr. Randolph liked Rose. That little smile she had, how she was still sweet when life had tried so hard to make her bitter. It wasn't any of his business what she did in her trailer, but those strangers, the writer and his smart-ass sidekick, looked like trouble, and they'd been in there for hours, way past her normal bedtime. He reached for the phone and called the sheriff's station. Deputy Mulligan tuned Thornton's chatter out. He didn't think writers were particularly useful people, and a huge manhunt for one struck him as idiotic, certainly not worth the missed opportunity for coffee and pie. It wasn't even clear what the man had done, except run from them at the trailer park. Mulligan knew he wasn't alone. The sheriff's patience with the Fed was running out. Nightingale stared through the broken studio window into the dark woods. He turned around, started to walk out, but Maine grabbed his arm. "Young man, you almost shot me. You don't shoot off rounds at people like that. What's the matter with you?" Nightingale shook his arm free, marched out. His cheeks burned with rage and humiliation. With Nightingale gone and the night wind blowing in through the broken studio window, Maine stared at Sarah. The sheriff looked away. Maine's voice shook with barely controlled anger. "That boy's doing more drinking than thinking. I hope you know what you're doing, Sarah. He's got a sickness in his eyes. You take my word for it. He wants Wake for a reason, and it's not for anything good." Hartman watched as Wake's features slackened. The man was bullheaded, no doubt. Even lying on the bed, he'd almost broken Hartman's nose the second time. But with a little time, he could break Wake down, give him proper direction. Wake was easily the most promising subject he had had. Well, since Tom, really. "Sleep well, Alan," Hartman whispered with a smile. "Let me take care of you." He sniffed hard to clear his throbbing nose, swallowed blood, and barely tasted it. Barry was in his element, making calls, making things happen, even if he didn't entirely know what those things were. He wouldn't let the hot sheriff chick down. Even if every noise he heard from outside, and he heard plenty, made him jump. He had only paused to text Al a message, told him to hurry up. Suddenly, Barry froze in mid-dial. A window broke somewhere in the building, and then the lights went out. Barry got back to his feet inside the Bright Falls General Store and dusted himself off. Right next to the cans of baked beans was a locked case filled with flare guns, and yet here was a conveniently placed barrel of crowbars. Barry's smile widened as he realized that this was the classic movie scene where the hero had to gear up and arm himself to the teeth. Barry threw himself into the role. Doc sat down heavily. He examined Barry and Rose. Barry was already recovering. Rose was another story. She was conscious, but she was barely present, almost delirious, disturbed, touched in the head, they used to say. It wasn't the first time Doc had seen someone in such a state, but it had been over 30 years. Doc poured himself a stiff drink. He hadn't forgotten a thing. Danny had stepped out, but what stumbled back in was something else, something alien, a monster. Walter tried to kill it, first with his fists, then a chair. It wouldn't die. Instead, it kept coming, unaffected by the beating it had taken. After Walter managed to kick it down the cellar stairs, fear took over. He ran, got behind the wheel, gunned the engine. The booze wouldn't make him forget, but he knew he had to try. When he stopped the car at the Anderson farm, Walter felt relieved. Oblivion was close at hand. The brothers wouldn't miss a jar of moonshine or two in the booby hatch. But then he saw the man on the porch, and he knew who it was. Driving for his life and knowing it was useless, he didn't realize he was crying until he couldn't see the road for the tears. As the deputies hauled Wake and Wheeler away, Agent Nightingale eagerly examined the stack of papers Wake had been carrying. It was incomplete, a collection of random pages, but there was enough. He saw his own name in there, among others. His hand shook with emotion. Finally, it was proof. He had been right all along. Nightingale tried to make sense of the manuscript. It was disjointed and strange. He didn't understand half of it, but it all rang true. Impossibly true. He took out his hip flask when he reached the page that described how he reached the page that made him take out his hip flask. It wasn't the booze that made his mind reel. Nightingale felt the situation veering out of his control, but the gun at least felt steady in his hands. He was ready to fire, resolved that he would let this happen over his dead body. And yet he hesitated. He had seen this moment before, read it in the page. He was transfixed by the déjà vu and the horror that he was a character in a story someone had written. Then the monstrous presence burst in behind him and dragged him into the night. Making her way through the water pipe alone, Cynthia was angry at the writer. Foolish young man, taking unnecessary risks. And the way he broke the rules. Didn't he understand what was at stake? Since the terrible days in the 70s, she hadn't wavered once, as hard as it had been. She was tired of protecting the town all these long years, and now only wanted to rest. In the end, Barry wasn't going to shoot Sarah. They both knew that. Once she had no chance of catching up to Wake, Barry gave up the gun and sat down on the floor, shielding his face from the merciless glare of the well-lit room. "I don't think I'm ever going to see him again," he said in a weak voice. Sarah didn't have it in her to be mad at him. Besides, he was probably right. The hunters were big, thick-set men, confident and at home in the woods. They were feeling good, running on beer, ghost stories, and camaraderie late into the night. It did them no good, as they were taken by the dark presence, sucked deep into a darkness far worse than any ghost story they ever told or heard. Cynthia Weaver worked hard, following her obsessive rituals, sometimes fighting them, always giving in to them in the end. She haunted the halls of Bright Falls abandoned power plant. She marked her caches with light-sensitive paint that could only be seen by eyes that had been touched by darkness and saved by light like she'd been. Hartman kept talking, giving Barry the grand tour, clearly proud of the place. He went on and on about his hunting trophies, and Barry was impressed. But he was here on business. He raised his voice, cut through the monologue. "Hey, Hartman, where's Al?" Hartman stopped in mid-sentence, annoyed at the interruption. He nodded at the hulking orderly standing nearby. The man smiled and clapped a practiced hand on Barry's shoulder. Nobody in Bright Falls seemed to know where Al was, but Rose, the waitress at the diner, had seen him. From what Barry could tell, Al pretty much fell off the face of the earth when he left the diner. Rose was just the kind of fan that Al hated, but she really tried to help. She was smart, too, knew a lot about what was going on in the town, knew a lot about Al, even knew who Barry was. Barry liked her. That was no big surprise. When it came to women, Barry and Al rarely saw eye to eye. At the last instant, I changed direction and threw myself down. The axe splintered the trunk of a tree. I stumbled into the pool of bright light. My lungs burned. I was too exhausted to move. I tensed as I waited for the killing blow, but it never came. I raised my head. Nothing moved in the darkness beyond. For the moment, bathed in the cold light, I was safe. I turned the corner, afraid of what the flashlight's beam might reveal. Suddenly, a roughly painted symbol of a torch glowed in the light. Behind it, hidden by a rock, sat a battered metal trunk. It was here for a reason, packed with supplies, batteries, flares, ammo, things you need to make it through the darkness of the night. Something left behind by someone who knew what I knew, and more. I heard them before I saw them, swooping down from the sky and screeching as they came. I spun around just as the cloud was upon me. For an instant, I stared into 100 dead eyes, black pearls glittering in the darkness. I raised the flashlight and the swarm exploded like fireworks. Feathers burned, turned into ash. I couldn't hear my scream above theirs. The visitor center was sturdy, but the impact turned the front of the building into splinters. Rusty was thrown across the lobby like a rag doll and hit the far wall hard. It didn't hurt until he tried to move and saw his leg bend the wrong way, felt the broken rib stabbing him on the inside. Rusty howled in pain and fear, suddenly afraid to die alone. The night had been one desperate situation after another. I was exhausted, and my body felt as though it had been chewed up and spat out. The flashlight was heavy in my hand, and each pull of the trigger sent a painful shock up my arm. But I was finally out of the woods and things were looking up. That's when I heard the chainsaw. The FBI agent's command froze me in place. I considered surrender. It was all falling apart anyway. I could give in, let someone else deal with it, but it felt all wrong. Call it instinct, his posture, the way he held the gun. He was no friend. Shots ringing in my ears, I leaped for the hole in the fence and stumbled into the darkness beyond. The bulldozer's engine roared to life. Mud and rocks flew as it fought for traction. It crashed through the concrete wall and landed heavily in the yard. If it were an animal, it would have shaken its head after the impact, fixed its eyes on me, and charged. Of course, it had no head, nor eyes. Shadows crawled on its form, twisting it into a monster. Then, it came for me. I tried to run, but I knew the dark presence had me now. It swooped me up like a child, and hungry darkness closed in around me. Somehow I managed to light the flare. With a roar, it tossed me away over the railing. I fell toward the dark waters of Cauldron Lake far below. I hit the black water hard. Panic and horror shook me as I was sucked under, the flare torn from my hand, to sink deep into the dark place the monstrous thing called home. I slammed the door shut right in his smug face. He pleaded for me to open the door. True to form, the asshole actually thought I would obey. I had no sympathy left, no guilt either, not for him. I took a moment to savor the scream. I bet I had a smile on my face. It was all that I had time for. The dark presence was inside the lodge with me. For the moment, Barry was just glad he had survived the fall. He had been separated from Al, and there was no easy way to climb back up. He told himself he'd be okay in the gloomy forest at night. He would just have to wait for a while for Al to find his way down. Barry turned when he heard the heavy footsteps and saw the movement. The man-shaped shadow lunged at him from the bushes, an axe held high. Barry screamed and threw up his hand. The world exploded. I stared at the Viking paraphernalia that littered the area, surrounding an unlikely centerpiece. A full-size stage complete with an impressive sound system with all the trimmings, including a dragon. It took a special kind of crazy to build something like this in a remote field. When the sky split open with a deafening boom and the music started blasting, it felt strangely appropriate. Agent Nightingale stared at the passed-out rider. The man was sleeping off one hell of a night. Nightingale felt a stab of envy at Wake's oblivion, but he had a job to do. He put the gun to Wake's head and almost became a murderer. His hand shook and his throat felt tight and dry. Biting his teeth, he tried again to pull the trigger. He lost the nerve. Wake stirred. Nightingale would have to settle for an arrest. Sarah was almost starting to relax. Maybe they could turn this into a win yet. Suddenly, there was a piercing sound, like a table saw gone wild, as 100 birds made out of shadows swarmed into the rotor. The chopper bucked wildly and the board lit up, telling her what she already knew. They were going down. Barry Wheeler screamed next to her. Alice had screamed until she had no voice left to scream. Around her, the darkness was alive. It was cold and wet and malevolent and without end. She was a prisoner, trapped in the dark place. The terror would have burned her mind out, but one thing made her hang on. She could sense Alan in the dark. She could hear him. She could see the words he was writing as flickering shadows. He sensed her too. He was trying to work his way to her. When Thomas Zane fell for Barbara Jagger, it happened fast. She was young, vibrant, and beautiful, full of life. He had never been a very happy man, and without any seeming effort, she had changed all that. Zane felt good for the first time in his life. Everything she did was another piece of a jigsaw puzzle he hadn't even known he'd been missing. And best of all, she made the words flow, strong and sharp. She was his muse. Zane could feel the poems, taking form, shaping things. As he experimented, he imagined he could almost feel the power surging through the keys of the typewriter. It exhilarated him. But there was fear, too. If not for his young assistant Emile, he would have given it up. But Emile convinced him otherwise. He, too, had a way with words. Zane cut its heart out. But it didn't die. The thing that wore Barbara's face kept crooning sweet nothings sugar-laced with poison. He put on the suit, untied the monster from the chair. The thing in his arms thrashed weakly, but he held fast. He stepped outside, off the pier, and into the dark water, a sinking pinprick of light descending toward a bottom that never came. It's 1976. Madness reigns at the Anderson farm. Contrary to all logic, the headiest ingredient of their moonshine is unfiltered water from Cauldron Lake. The Andersons feel like gods. Odin can't stop laughing. He contemplates cutting his eye out. Tor runs across the field, naked, shrieking, hammer in his hand, trying to catch lightning. Their songs have power. Something ancient is stirring in the depths, coming back. Shadows stirred and the wind picked up as I ran through the forest. I felt the dark presence turning its gaze toward me. Then the moonlight was blotted out by dark shadows that raced violently across the ground, moving too swiftly to be natural. Darkness gathered between the trees and melted again to reveal the taken. No natural path had brought them here. The dark presence had touched the girl to lure the rider into a trap. Now it was night, and he lay helpless, drugged, lit only by the flickering of the TV screen filled with static. Shadows coalesced in the room as the dark presence leaned close to the rider, ready to touch him again. Back to work, boy. The bottom of Cauldron Lake was a graveyard of things the lake had claimed in one way or another over the decades. The dark presence brought them up in its wake, scattering the rotten waterlogged hull of an old boat here, the remains of a long-ago crashed airplane there. Trees shattered under the impacts. The earth groaned. It didn't even notice. The storm raged on as the Anderson brothers walked unsteadily away from the clinic with the other patients in tow, knowing that this time they wouldn't return. The darkness around them seethed with horrors, but Tor and Odin were unafraid. Their eyes glinted with guile. They knew every secret path, and there was blood on their hands. They had fought these shades before. The kidnapper fired his gun one last time, and the shadow vanished into the darkness it had come from. See? Nothing to it, Wake. The thought of Alice in his hands was revolting. We stood on the wooden platform of Lover's Peak, the waterfall in the mountain behind us, the lights of the radio mast blinking red in the heights above. I fought with the urge to take a swing, force myself to speak. Let's cut the act now. Where's my wife? There was no misunderstanding. Cauldron Lake was where Alice and I had stayed, but there was no cabin and no island. I was missing a week. What had happened to me? What had happened to Alice? I had to get her back. I couldn't face life without her. I lifted the page in front of my eyes and read it. In it, I lifted the page in front of my eyes and read it. In it, I lifted the page in front of my eyes and read it. In it, I lifted the page in front of my eyes and read it. In it, I lifted the page in front of my eyes and read it. In it, I lifted the page in front of my eyes and read it. The Taken stood before me. It was impossible to focus on it, as if it stood in a blind spot caused by a brain tumor and eye disease. It was bleeding shadows like ink underwater, like a cloud of blood from a shark bite. I was terrified. I squeezed the flashlight like my life depended on it, willing it to stop coming any closer. Suddenly something gave, and the light seemed to shine brighter. At first I kept finding the pages as if by accident. The book I couldn't remember was either a terrible and true prophecy or an act of creation that had rewritten the world. I began to hunt the pages feverishly, for they held the answer to the mystery. With it, I could save myself. With it, I could save Alice. On more than one occasion, Alice had tried to explain to me how it felt to be afraid of the dark. To her, darkness wasn't simply the absence of light, but something more tangible than that. It was something you could touch and feel. Worse than that, it was something with a mind of its own, something malicious and malign. For her, things changed when they were wrapped in darkness. They turned into something else, something foreign, and nothing was safe or innocent anymore. I'd never really understood what she meant, until now. Departure by Alan Wake. Things were never as simple in real life as in fiction. I had lost count of the times I had wished there'd be a clear reason for my writer's block, something to fight, something to lash out on. There wasn't. I was filled with doubt. I was nothing like the hero in my books. Alex Casey had gone through his life with single-minded determination, never wavering from his goal. Even now, I was angry at myself, angry at Alice, angry at Barry. I was fumbling and I had no plan. The darkness that wore Barbara Jagger's face was furious. The story in the manuscript had been making it stronger all the time, but now the light had set the writer free and hurt it, weakened it. It was only a matter of days before the dark presence would be strong again, but meanwhile, it would be difficult to recapture the writer. The dark presence followed the choreography laid out to it in the manuscript, growing stronger and stronger, moving like a storm from one scene of destruction to the next. But it was still bound to follow the story and chained to the dark place it came from. When the story reached the end it longed for, it would finally be free. For it to be free, the dark presence needed the writer to finish the story. Again and again, the story let it get frustratingly close to the writer without letting it capture him. It was bound by the events depicted in the manuscript, but it could pursue the writer indirectly, put others on the task and stop those who would help him. It took over everything in its path, made them its puppets, and sent them after Alan Wake. The dark presence was no longer trying to capture the writer so he could create the ending it wanted. The writer knew too much. He was too strong. And he carried a weapon left behind by Thomas Zane, something that could hurt it. Now, the darkness was doing everything in its power to simply stop the writer from ever reaching Cauldron Lake and the dark place it came from. The story I had written in the cabin had come true. Touched by the dark presence, I had written a horror story, but the end was still missing. The story was incomplete, and the last unfinished page of the manuscript still sat in the typewriter in the cabin study. If I could get back there, if I could read the page, then I could write my own ending to this story and save Alice. Hartman followed the fall of Alan Wake with his binoculars. When the writer hit the water, he ordered Jack to take the boat to him. The spot was easy to see in the dark, even with all the extra lights in the boat. The flare floated and kept burning even in the water. Jack turned the radio louder as the engine sputtered. The music was rough and clanking, something the Anderson brothers would no doubt have enjoyed. But Hartman chose to ignore it. Wake was finally within his reach. The man turned to face me. His face was covered in shadows. It was hard to make him out in the darkness of the forest that surrounded us, but the axe he lifted was plain to see. It glistened with the blood of his victim. He grinned madly. The shadows were alive, distorting his features. It was a scene from a nightmare. But I was awake. I'd first heard the poem in a dream, recited by a strange UFO-like light. I'd read it again in the cabin in a book by Thomas Zane. For he did not know that beyond the lake he called home lies a deeper, darker ocean green, where waves are both wilder and more serene. To its ports I've been. To its ports I've been. Children of the Elder God lyrics by old gods of Asgard. The first verse and chorus. Warriors, torchbearers, come redeem our dreams. Shine a light upon this night of otherworldly fiends. Odin's might be your guide. Divorce you from the sane. Hammer's way will have its say. Rise up in their name. O memory and thought, jet black and clawed, children of the Elder God, scourge of light upon the dark. Children of the Elder God lyrics by old gods of Asgard. The second verse and chorus. Scratching hag, you can rake your claws and gnash your crooked teeth. You've taken slaves like ocean waves, now feel the ocean seethe. Father Tor bless the war between the dark and light. In their songs let their wrongs bring disillusion's night. O memory and thought, jet black and clawed, children of the Elder God, scourge of light upon the dark. The Poet and the Muse, lyrics by old gods of Asgard. The first verse. There's an old tale wrought with mystery of Tom the poet and his muse, and a magic lake which gave a life to the words the poet used. Now the muse she was his happiness, and he rhymed about her grace, and told her stories of treasures deep beneath the blackened waves, till in the stillness of one dawn, still in its misty crown, the muse she went down to the lake, and in the waves she drowned. The Poet and the Muse, lyrics by old gods of Asgard, the second verse. The poet came down to the lake to call out to his dear. When there was no answer, he was overcome with fear. He searched in vain for his treasure lost, and too soon the night would fall. Only his own echo would wail back at his call. And when he swore to bring back his love by stories he'd create, nightmares shifted in their sleep in the darkness of the lake. The Poet and the Muse, lyrics by old gods of Asgard, the third verse. In the dead of night she came to him with darkness in her eyes, wearing a morning gown, sweet words as her disguise. He took her in without a word, for he saw his grave mistake, and vowed them both to silence deep beneath the lake. Now, if it's real or just a dream, one mystery remains, for it is said on moonless nights they may still haunt this place. The Poet and the Muse, lyrics by old gods of Asgard, the chorus. And now to see your love set free, you will need the witch's cabin key. Find the Lady of the Light, gone mad with the night. Find the Lady of the Light, still raving in the night. That's how you reshape destiny. Hartman hurried down the corridor. He had disliked leaving Wake when he was surely at his most susceptible to therapy. But this was not an ordinary storm. Wake had been writing, and he had woken something up in the depths of the lake. Now, it was coming for him. Hartman had naturally prepared for a situation like this. The idiot brothers would keep Wake distracted while Hartman double-checked everything, just to be sure. Maud had checked all of Stucky's rental cabins. There had been no sign of the Wakes. It was dark when he'd found their car parked at the end of the road by Cauldron Lake. It made no sense. They must have taken a wrong turn, but there was no sign of them, and the car had been there for hours already. Frustrated, Mott stood on the rotten ruin of the footbridge that had once led to Diver's Isle before it sank beneath the waves years ago. The boss wouldn't be happy. Hartman had never felt as anxious as during the week after Mott had managed to lose the Wakes. Their car stood by the path that had once led to Diver's Isle. Hartman thought about Thomas Zane's cabin in the depths. It was only a matter of time before Wake started writing. They had to be found, and fast. The moment he heard on the police radio that Sheriff Breaker had picked up Wake, he was already in his car driving toward town. Hartman knew he was no creator. He had no ambitions on that front. And he certainly didn't want to end up like every artist he had worked with here, damaged in ways that were hard to describe, or worse. It was enough for Hartman to maintain creative control and provide direction, to be a producer. That was what most of these people were in need of anyway. Of course, suitable subjects were few and far in between. Even after all this time, hearing the Night Springs theme caused a surge of conflicting emotions in me. It had been my first real writing gig. Barry had known a guy who knew a guy, and suddenly I'd been a semi-regular writer on the show. I'd always been ashamed of the job. felt it was trash. I'd wanted to be an artist, a novelist. I'd been naive back then. It had taken a long time to learn to be proud of the work. The pipe wrenched itself loose from the bridge's steel framework. Wrapped in darkness, it floated in midair, twitching. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The heavy object lurched at me with impossible force. I threw myself out of the way, but just barely. When I turned my flashlight on it, it shook in a dark rage, before it flew at me again. I stepped into the gas station's garage. It was dark and quiet. The place was a mess. It looked like someone trashed the place or that there'd been some kind of fight. Light spilled into the room through an open door at the back, and I made my way toward it. Without any warning, I was blinded by a bright light. An old portable TV on the shelf had come alive by itself. Impossibly, I could see myself on the screen, talking like a madman. "The cabin on Cauldron Lake?" she asked. The sheriff looked at me suspiciously. The early morning light flooded through the office windows. I would probably never have gotten out of the woods alive without her help, but I couldn't tell her the truth of what I'd faced the previous night. She'd think I was lying or crazy. She'd lock me up, and she wouldn't help me find Alice. The darkness surged towards me, sucking everything loose from the ground into its depths, tugging at my clothes. I saw the flare the kidnapper had dropped and threw myself towards it just as I felt my feet leave the ground. The darkness embraced me with the force of a tornado. Somehow I managed to light the flare. The darkness roared and cast me away. I fell toward the dark waters of the lake far below. I stared through the bars of the jail cell. Barry stood behind me, swaying on his feet, looking as ill as I felt. Agent Nightingale stood on the other side of the bars with Sheriff Breaker. Nightingale had a stack of manuscript pages in his hand. He seemed unhinged as he gloated. "Well, I've got you now, Raymond Chandler. It's all here, all the evidence, including conspiracy to murder a federal agent." Again, Alice's screams rang in the stillness of the night. I saw myself run toward the cabin, flashlight in my hand. I followed my past self. I was an out-of-body observer, a time traveler in a crazy drunken dream. This was the beginning. The night Alice had disappeared, the mystery of what had happened during the missing week was about to reveal itself. I tried to hold on to Alice, but her form melted away. I was losing control. Dr. Hartman stood in her place. I wanted to hit him, but my arms were jelly. He smiled. It was a reassuring smile, and I hated him for it. "I had to give you a sedative. Don't fight it. You went through another rough period. Right now it's very important that you stay calm. We don't want you to have another episode. You're a patient at my clinic. Have been for a while now." Lightning flashed behind the windows of Cauldron Lake Lodge. Tor Anderson laughed and held the steel hammer above his head. Nurse Sinclair was trying to calm him down without success. Tor grinned madly and shouted, "My hammer's up. Here's a friendly poke from Molnir, wench." He brought the hammer down with all his might on Sinclair's head. "We're on a comeback tour, baby." Thomas Zane knew he had to remove all that had made this horror possible, including himself. That was the only way to banish the dark presence he had unleashed and now looked at him through the eyes of his dead love. But he also knew that despite his best efforts, it might someday return. So even as he wrote himself and his work out of existence, he added a loophole as insurance, an exception to the rule. Anything of his stored in a shoebox would remain. The dark place I found myself in was unlike anything I could ever have imagined. It wasn't solid. It flowed. It was conceptual and subjective. For someone else, an artist in another field, it would have been very different. I could sense the story of the manuscript all around me, the words and ideas floating in the air, poised to become real. After Zane had gone, I stood alone in the shifting dream that was the dark place. I had to find a way to the cabin. I'd written myself a way through this place in the manuscript. I followed the idea of a path. I'd written myself across the ocean that blocked my way, and with that, there was a bridge to the island beyond. The idea of the cabin flickered in the underwater darkness. I willed the cabin to be real, and it was. Barry took another sip of the heavenly coffee. He grinned at Rose. Surely this was love. Rose gushed on breathlessly. "The new one will be a masterpiece, I know it. You must tell him not to listen to the trolls in the forums saying Departure will never get finished. He should take his time and make it perfect." I can wait.
Yes.
Oh no.
Damn.
What the hell? What the hell?
Shit. Oh crap.
Yeah, I needed to get the generator running. I needed a key for the door. I had to get the door open. I had to find the key to get the door open. I had to get the gate open. Birds. More birds. You gotta be kidding me. Nice to see you, too. More of you? Could have fooled me, pal. And I thought New Yorkers were rude. Down, boy. I'll write. I'll keep writing. Outside, there's only darkness. Outside the cabin, outside the story, there's only darkness. I can feel her presence in the dark. Just now, I could smell her perfume in the room. I'll reach her. I'll fix it up. I'll bring her back. The story will come true. If I stop, she's lost. A writer is a light that reveals the world of his story from darkness, shapes it from nothingness. The way a sculptor carves a statue from a block of granite. If I stop, the world I'm making dies. Darkness will reclaim it. It's a long, hard journey into the dark. Alice's life is at stake, but I can't think about that, or I'll lose it. The dread lingers at the edge of perception. I'll push on. Anything is possible here. I'll write the story. I'll save her. A story is not a machine that does what you tell it. A story is a beast with a life of its own. You can create it, shape it, but as the story grows, it starts wanting things of its own. Change one thing and you set off a chain reaction of events that spreads through the whole thing. The characters have to be true to themselves. The events need to follow a logic that fits the story. A single flaw and the magic is gone. The story dies. Alice dies. I can't tell reality from dream anymore, but it seems I have an imaginary editor to help me. She's an old woman in a funeral dress. I call her Barbara Jagger. She's very strict. I'm writing faster and faster. My manuscript is being heavily revised. The edits are getting very aggressive, and each day there's less of me and more of her. I hate it, but I know she's right. She promises me I can save Alice this way. She knows more of this than I do, about the complex incantation I'm attempting, about this place. She's worked with another writer under similar circumstances, Thomas Zane. The genre of the story seems to be shifting. It's turning into a horror story. I'm getting close. I can feel it. Anything outside of writing is a struggle. I feel ill. I managed to make my way downstairs. There's a shoebox filled with books and papers by Thomas Zane. It's very hard to focus, but I managed to read some of it. He's a poet, and a good one. He writes of muses and creators summoning fabulous things from a magic lake, using his powers to shape the world of a realm of gods and dreams and demons, dark things that wait for a chance to slip through, wearing the flesh of men as disguise. Zane writes about himself, his girlfriend being taken over by a dark presence, about growing scared of the lake. Zane believes it's a mirror to the gaping void of darkness above, where some Lovecraftian presence lurks. I crawled back upstairs. I'll borrow these things for my story. They ring true. They fit. Something's wrong. I'm not myself. It's hard to think that there's a shadow inside my head. I can only focus on writing. Everything else is a blur. I'm trapped in this cabin. Have been for days, but it's always dark outside. My editor is real. I saw her again. She's not human. It's not human. A dark presence is wearing the old woman's face. She was covered in clinging shadows. There's a hole in her chest where her heart should be. I think I've made a horrible... I've run through every possible course in my head. If I continue like the dark presence wants me to, the story I'm writing won't save Alice. It's a horror story, and it's going to kill her, and me, and everybody in this town. No one will survive. Darkness will consume everything. This is what it's wanted all along. It will be free, unstoppable. It used Alice to get to me, dangled her in front of me to keep me going. It was never going to release her. I'm going to change this. I'll escape. I've written myself into the story. I'm now the protagonist. This feels like a terrible risk, but it's the only way to save Alice. I'll be bound by the events of the story just as much as anyone else who's been woven into it. The story must stay true for this to work. There have to be victims along the way, near escapes, cliffhangers. In a horror story, it can't be certain that the hero will succeed or even survive. He almost has to die. I'll write my own escape into the story next. I need help. Zane's going to be the one who'll help me. I'll make it happen.
Nightmares. Too deep. Can't take the pressure. It's too much.
Suddenly, Wake found himself face to face with himself.
Day had become night. The diner had become deserted. Then the town itself turned against Wake. Cars flew toward him. It cracked bone and crushed muscle. It oozed hate. It wanted to bury planetarium, the playground, Wake's pathetic memories of the wonder years, and the contrary little boy pretending he didn't miss his father he never knew. It surged up and beat Wake down. Merry-go-rounds and slides, eager to cave in his head. The world was... it was changing, twisting, out of control. It was too big on the inside. He couldn't see the ceiling. Something was moving in there. He was lost. He couldn't find the exit. He could feel them coming. Not even flesh anymore. Just shadows and ghosts and thoughts slicing through his flesh. They were here. They were here. Wake's own words, littering the landscape. His books common and discarded, like mud beneath his feet. Hardbacks, paperbacks, turned against him. Trash. Just cheap trash. The earth shook. Streetlights pushed themselves up through the ground, flickering madly and spitting spark. In the shadows, Wake saw far too many figures advancing eagerly, already tasting the kill. He entered the trap, surrounded by enemies. Wake had nowhere to run. Darkness. Darkness coming. Swept him away. Lost. He knew. He knew. He couldn't hold on. He knew there was no way out. Oh! The world was going wrong. Wrong! Wake didn't understand it. He would never make it. He would never wake up. He'd get swallowed up in the rising tide of darkness. It was coming. It was coming. Swept away by the gathering insanity, Zane was gone. Wake could feel the pressure, gnawing at his mind. The darkness wasn't so bad. It was in him. He felt it. He knew the voice spoke the truth. It was just too hard to think. He couldn't make sense of it. He wanted to go with the flow. Stop thinking and just let go. Abandoned by his only ally, all Wake could do was accept the inevitable. The scope of this horror was unimaginable. It would have been so much easier to let go. Everything he saw was a twisted memory, a stray thought. Even this evil he faced came from within. He knew he could just let go, succumb to it. A part of him had already done it. It was over. It was finished. He was done. What did he have left to fight for? He'd lost everything even before he came here. Even his sanity was gone. What was the point? Ah! He couldn't make it stop! Why had everyone abandoned him to die here? He had nothing left to live for! Why? 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 What good was it going to do? Ah! No, 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 no. It burns! It burns! It burns! He was killing himself! Why was this happening? He couldn't even understand what he was facing. It was all a wasted effort.
Wake heard the old gods playing. Music came out all wrong. It attracted the horrors. The music screeched and boomed around Wake as the monsters attacked. With each passing moment, more of them came. He would get overrun. Surrounded by the enemies and deafened by the noise, Wake was helpless. The wind was picking up. Wake was too high. Too high! At this height, the water would be like hitting concrete. The storm was coming! It would throw him off! The storm spun him around! It was made of darkness! He'd seen what it could do! It swept everything away! The world was tilted! It was turning upside down! Wake was lost! He would fall! He couldn't tell which way was up! He would die here, torn apart by the whirlwind! Wake was forced to run through a maze, hopelessly sprinting in the wheel, never getting anywhere. His life in miniature. It was useless. Another memory made real. Wake would never make it. The insanity he was facing was already a part of it, in him, his own doing. He couldn't possibly win. He didn't even want to. The bridge groaned in the unnatural wind. It was heralding the enemy's arrival. Wake wouldn't leave this place alive. Wake ran for the light. It was pointless. He would never reach it. His life would be snuffed out just as easily as the very thing he thought would save him.
I just can't argue with that. I think I should stay here before I ruin what life she has left. I do. I should have done that from the start. I was so stupid. Thanks for putting up with me, Doctor. I don't deserve it. By all means. All right. Yeah, I have had bad headaches. I know she has. Dr. Hartman, I think that's spot on. I can't argue with any of that. No, I understand. It's important that I face it. No, probably not. Oh, hey, that sounds like fun. Come on, let's hear what she has to say.
They kept coming. There were too many of them. Hordes and hordes of them, swarming over the landscape, eager to kill. They were coming for Wake, and this time they would get him with sheer numbers. Everything is dark. It's crawling into my head, twisting everything around. Are these my thoughts? It was in everything. It was even taking the people Wake knew, turning his friends against him. They were all against him.